Hello, welcome to the third live Socialist Bake Along. So I'm gonna wait for a bit for people to start sort of filtering in and talk to myself, and then I'll some knives, it's fine. Do what I usually do and just natter on for a little bit whilst I give people time to start filtering in. Let's Okay, so people are starting to filter in, so I'm just going to be nattering onto myself for a little bit whilst I give more people time to sort of start to filter in. But welcome everyone to the third live Socialist Bake Along. Today we are going to be making Mediterranean inspired scones. Using the word inspired because that's sort of like my caveat if someone yells at me like, these are Mediterranean scones. Shut up, this recipe was sort of born out of two things. First of all, my love firstly scones, also my love for tomato bread. And secondly, it was also born out of the fact that I hadn't been able until now to find bread flour. So I finally have some bread flour. So this is your warning. Warning makes it sound ominous. This is your notice that in a couple of weeks I'll be doing some stuff with some bread flour. So get out to the shops and try and look for some bread flour if you can, because in a couple of weeks I will be doing something with bread. Hi Rahul, hope everything's okay in Colchester. You're just a few miles up the road from me. I'm in grey Langdon Hills, suburb of Basildon. So I can't even remember what I was saying. Oh yes, the recipe was born out of my love for tomato bread, which is one of my favourite breads. I love bread so much, especially Italian breads. I know there's a bit of a thing between the French and the Italians over who makes the nicest bread. The French have the pastries nailed, like, the French have their pastries nailed. I just prefer Italian breads. I don't know if that's just me. So, this is, inspired by one of my favourite Italian breads. It's Tuscan tomato bread. So I hadn't been able to get some bread flour, so I thought, scones are a little bit like bread if you do them savoury. Obviously, you don't have to. You can do sweet scones. Why don't I try and make a tomato bread scone? So this is a recipe that I've never actually tested properly. So this is going to be really fun because things might go horribly, horribly wrong, and you get to laugh at my expense. How fun is that? Um, I'm kidding. I'm sure that it will be fantastic. It will go really well. So, just to give people a little bit of time to sort of filter in, I'm just going to be going through the ingredients. So, scones are a great thing to do because they're pretty easy to make. You don't need a lot of ingredients. Some of them you can find in your store cupboard, just lying around in your fridge. So what we have first is this is quite full, so I don't want to tilt it too much, but we've got 225 grams of self-raising flour. Sorry, I had to think then for a second. I'm very tired, can you tell? We've got 225 grams of raising flour. If you've been able to get your hands on some self-raising flour, what you can do is you can use plain flour and just add a teaspoon or so of baking powder. We've also got 50 grams of butter or dairy-free spread. One of the great things about scones is that they're really easy to veganise because there's no eggs or anything. All you need is the only like dairy ingredient, or I suppose there's milk as well, but we'll get to that. There's 100 millilitres of milk as well. So the good thing about scones is, as I said, they're very easy to veganise. If you don't want to use dairy, milk, or butter, I'm using dairy ingredients just because they were what was in my fridge. But you can use a dairy-free spread or a non-dairy milk, almond milk or something. In fact, no, I am using almond milk. I am using almond milk because we had that in the cupboard. So yeah, really easy to veganise. We also need a teaspoon of baking powder. If you're using plain flour and a teaspoon of baking powder instead of self-raising flour, you still do need the extra baking powder to get that extra rise. We also need a pinch of salt. So that's for a basic scone recipe. Then the Mediterranean extras. I have, now, some of you may have seen my video that I posted a couple of hours ago about my nightmare, shall we say, with the sun-dried tomatoes. So I did briefly explain that when we got our shopping, they didn't have sun-dried tomatoes. And I know I also said olives in the recipe, but I'm not a huge fan of olives myself. My mother loves olives, but my brother, who will also be eating these scones, is not a fan, so I wanted to make something that hopefully we can all enjoy. So I was looking for sun-dried tomatoes. I bought what we thought would be an appropriate substitute. Instead, it's like a sun-dried tomato paste, so it's a little bit more like liquidy than I would have liked. A bit more oily, but I think I've managed to circumnavigate that slight problem. I've managed to sieve it, and so it's not very oily. But if it is still a little bit too liquidy, then I can always withhold some of the milk. Hopefully, it should be fine. And like I say, at the very least, if things go wrong, you get to laugh at my expense. Okay. So that's the first optional extra. The second optional extra that I have is some vegetarian parmesan, or Italian hard cheese. They're not allowed to call it parmesan, I don't think, if it's not from the Parma region of Italy. I'm not Italian, so as you can probably tell. So this is my vegetarian hard cheese. With some cheeses, you do need to check that they are vegetarian, because some cheeses are made with an enzyme that, without being a bit too disgusting, involves the killing of an animal in order to access that enzyme. So not all cheeses are vegetarian. If you're vegan and you still sort of want a kind of cheesy flavour, you can also use vegan cheese, vegan hard cheese, or you can get like a teaspoon of nutritional yeast or something, which also gives like a similar sort of flavour. But this cheese is just to add a little bit of extra flavour, and to sprinkle across the top of my scones. But honestly, sun-dried tomatoes and olives are very strong flavours, so if you don't want the cheese, then that's fine. It's just something that I like because I really like cheese. Okay, I've been nattering on for a while. Green olives are elite. No, Daisy. Black olives. I don't like green olives. Black olives, but you know, whatever. You do you. So, what we're going to do... Oh, the other thing I should say is I don't have my mixer today. I don't have my mixer because I don't need it. I don't need my mixer, so yeah, this is all done by hand, all done by elbow grease, which is good. All you need is your hands, and a couple of like spoons, knives, and things. So we're going to start. By preheating the oven to 220 degrees or 200 degrees if you have a fan oven. So I'm just gonna line that all the way around. This is so wholesome. Thank you, Imogen. Thank you. I like bacon. Can't believe I've been olive shamed. Sorry, Daisy. Enjoy your green olives. I'm sure they're lovely. I just personally am not a fan. So now that we've preheated the oven, what we're going to do now is line our baking trays. So just like when we were making the cookies, this is really easy. I have in Blue Peter fashion. Here's one I made earlier. All you need to do is you just need to get your baking paper and you just need to cut it so that it fits onto your baking tray. My baking trays are quite quite small, so I've got 2 of them just in case, because when we make our scones, we don't want them to sort of spread into each other, so we've got to leave a decent amount of room on the baking tray. So that's why I've got 2 baking trays. You may find that you can fit all of yours into one baking tray. I may find that I can fit all of mine into one baking tray, but I've got 2 just in case. And if you don't have 2 baking trays, then you can always do them in 2 batches. Batches, that word that so eluded me last time. So, I've nattered on for about 10 minutes now. So just before I get into the actual baking, this is all in aid of Socialist appeal, which is a Marxist tendency of workers and labour. Workers and youth, sorry, I'm really tired, can you tell? A Marxist tendency of workers and youth, and we are working to build the forces of Marxism so that we can achieve socialism in our lifetime and make all these horrible things that capitalism brings with it a thing of the past. Okay, so the link, if you would like to donate, is in the description of this live stream. Even if it's just like a couple of pounds or even £1, every donation that you can spare is very much appreciated, and every penny goes towards, as I say, continuing the good work that we're doing so that we can, build up as an organisation, spread our wonderful Marxist ideas, and really become the force that we need to be for the oncoming class struggle, and so that we can achieve socialism in our lifetime. Okay, so with that done with, we're going to get into the actual baking. Please feel free throughout this live stream to ask me any questions, or if you have any comments, then, as I say, please feel free, ask away, and periodically I'll have a look at the chat, see what you guys are saying. So, without further ado, let's get into some actual baking. And I have a very special guest. Comrade Ribbit is back to help me. So, Ribbit is just going to be watching over me and helping when he can. So, hopefully you can now all see my lovely baking bowl. So, what we're going to start with by doing is we're going to combine all the dry ingredients. So that's our flour. That's our flour. Our baking powder. So because I'm using self-raising flour, I only need a teaspoon of this. If I was using plain flour, I'd need about a teaspoon and a half to maybe 2 teaspoons. So that, and then my pinch of salt. So this is a very temperamental thing, so I'm just going to pour some out onto my hand. Just add a little pinch. Sun-dried tomatoes are quite salty, so you don't really need a lot of salt if you're using sun-dried tomatoes, and olives as well. Olives as well are quite salty. So now that we've got all our dry ingredients, what we're just going to do is we're just going to mix them a little bit with a spoon. So all our dry ingredients are nicely combined in the bowl. So next, what we're going to do is we're just going to add our butter. And what we're going to do is we're going to rub the butter into the flour. So the way we do that is we just grab hold of the flour and the butter and we just rub them together. Hopefully you can see that. And we want to be rubbing until it sort of resembles kind of breadcrumbs. This, by the way, is exactly the same way that you make short crust pastry. You just, with pastry, you have a lot more butter. So here we have a lot less butter compared to flour. And that's how we get that kind of like bready texture by not really having much butter. Because if you think about it, we've got like 225 grams of flour and only 50 grams of butter. So that's a lot more flour than butter. Whereas with pastry, be more of an even split. You are going to get your hands nice and dirty, so I should have said actually before, make sure that your hands are nice and clean and your tabletops have been wiped down and your hair tied back, which I did all of that off camera before starting the live stream, because I don't know, I feel like you might find it boring if you just watch me tie my hair up and cleaning my kitchen. Don't know, don't think that would raise much money if I live streamed that. Okay, so now you can see my hands are nice and floury, covered in flour and a bit of butter as well. So if you want to, you can wash your hands now, get off some of that stuff, but you're just going to be right back in there, so prepared to get your hands dirty again. So hopefully you'll be able to see we've kind of got like a breadcrumb sort of texture. Don't know if you can see that, but we've sort of got a darker, more sort of like off-white colour to our flour rather than the sort of more pure white that we had afterwards. So now that we've rubbed in our butter, what we're going to do is we're going to mix in our tomatoes. So if you haven't already, make sure that you have drained and dried your tomatoes or your olives as much as you can, because we don't want to get too much of that oil into our mixture. So even with sieving, you might be able to see that I've still got some oil in there, so I'm just trying to avoid that as much as I can, not get much oil. So I've got that in. If you're using olives, then you would add your olives at this point, making sure that they're chopped coarsely. And we also want to, if you're using cheese, then you might want to add some of your cheese now. You can obviously save all of it until the end to put on the top of your scones if you would like. I'm putting a little bit of my cheese in now. I'm putting about half of mine in, just under half, and saving the rest to go on top. So I'm gonna stir this in for a little bit, get some of that. If you're just using like normal sun-dried tomatoes and olives, then you should just need to stir them. Because this is like more of a paste, I'm gonna need to carry on rubbing this in. So yeah, it's back to, I can really smell that tomato. I love sun-dried tomatoes. A little bit expensive, so I don't have them very often. But when I do, it's a real nice little treat. I love sun-dried tomatoes. They're great in a quiche, in like a tart, on a pizza. They're one of life's little luxuries, I think. Oh, that smell. It's lovely. I was just wondering what those little lumps are, and then I realised it's the cheese. I don't think I got enough sleep last night. What's wrong with me? Okay. So, that's lovely. So I haven't added too much sun-dried tomato because it is quite a strong flavour. But you can have as much or as little as you would like, and obviously the same goes for olives. I keep forgetting that some people are probably using olives. So now what I am going to do is I am going to finally wash my hands, because these are getting a little bit dirty, a bit uncomfortable. There we go. So you can see there, I've got some nice, hopefully you can see, I know the lighting is sometimes terrible in these videos, but hopefully you can see I've got a nice orangey colour there. So that's all of that done. What we have to do now is we're going to take our mixture and we're just going to make a little bit of a well, sort of a little hole in the middle. Sort of, I don't want to, if I show you, it's going to collapse the well, but I'm hoping you know what. Hopefully, just visualise a little hole, a little well in the mixture. And then we're going to add our milk. I'm going to start by adding just over half, and then you want to get a knife. Hopefully this knife. You want to get a knife. Hoping this will be big enough. If not, I'll switch to my palette knife. And you just sort of want to chop it. Almost, yeah, like make sort of like a chopping motion. Stir it together. Now, my recipe did say 100 millilitres, sorry, 100 millilitres of milk, but you may find that you need more. So, again, if you need more, make another, as we put the rest of our milk in, again, make another little well. And I'm just going to pour the rest of my milk in and carry on with that sort of cutting to get all of that together. At some point you will have to get your hands dirty again to try and get it all to combine together, because you might be able to see there's sort of some more floury bits at the bottom. Now you don't really want to be handling this mixture too much. If you handle a mixture too much, it can become a little bit dense. So I'm just going to carefully try and get this to sort of come together. Now a scone dough should be a little bit stickier than maybe say a biscuit dough or a pastry dough. It's okay if it's it's okay if it's a little bit stickier than maybe you're used to if you are a avid pastry maker like I am, or biscuit maker like we did last week. So it might be a little bit stickier. Okay, but it should all come together in a nice dough. If it doesn't, then you can add more milk. Just smell those sun-dried tomatoes, it's lovely. If it is too sticky, then what you can always do is you can add some more flour. So, just get the bits of scone off my hands. God, I'm in a bit of a nightmare. Now what you want to be doing is you want to make some space on your workstation. That might mean you need to move some bowls out of the way. And can't get this dough off my hands. Cross that bridge when I come to it. So what you want to do now is you sort of want to wipe your hands a little bit clean, because we're going to need to flour our work surface. I'm just going to go and wash my hands again. There we go. We want to take our flour from before. First things first, first thing we want to flour our hands. So make sure that your hands, if you have washed your hands, that you should, because you don't want anything on them, make sure that your hands are perfectly dry. If they're not perfectly dry, the flour will go weird. So I want to put some flour. Hopefully you can see that all right. We want to flour our workstation, because we're going to tip out our dough onto our workstation, and we don't want our dough to stick to the table. Better to have slightly too much flour than not enough. Then we want to flour our hands so that the dough doesn't stick to our hands like it did when I was mixing it. And then we're going to tip out our dough onto this floured surface. Okay. Sprinkle a little bit of flour on top. Now, at the moment, this is about 5 centimetres thick. what we want to do is we want this at about 3-4 centimeters thick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my rolling pin and I'm just going to roll it out a little bit. If you don't have a rolling pin, that's fine. You can just use your hands, or you can use a glass, anything you can that will sort of roll it out. Don't want to be rolling it out much, and you certainly don't want to be handling the dough too much. There, that's slightly thinner. That's perfect. Now what we want to do is, there's different ways to shape scones. What you can do is you can use a cookie cutter or the rim of a glass if you want to. I'm just going to cut these into, well, we'll see how we're doing, either between 6 and 8. Roughly equal. As I say, this isn't bake off, so they don't need to be perfect, and I know for a fact that that cut I just made is not going to be perfect, but oh well, this isn't bake off. And so we make 8 cuts. It looks like a bit like a slice of pizza, doesn't it? And we just want to get it into sort of a round shape. As I say, not handling it too much. We sort of want to preserve that sort of thickness. So hopefully you can see I'm shaping this. I mean, if you would like pizza slice shaped scones, there's no reason why you can't have pizza slice shaped scones. But you can see there, I've sort of got a rough scone shape, but it's not perfect. That's okay. We don't need to strive for perfection in everything. This is all about just baking, having fun, and obviously raising some money for Socialist appeal. So now I have one scone. I'm going to pop that on my baking tray. Going to take my next one, just squidge it together, pat it down. Try not to handle this too much. You don't really want to be stretching the gluten or knocking any air out, any of those sorts of things that make our scones not perfect to eat. So there's another scone. Tell you what, my scones are going to be interesting shapes. Let's say that they're interesting shapes. That's about equal. Hope that you can see what I'm doing. I can't perfectly see the screen, but it's about right. And then just squeeze and pat, squeeze and pat until you get a shape that you're happy with. As I say, nothing wrong with pizza slice scones. In fact, I think that would be quite nice. You can actually use scones as a base for pizza. If you want to make some pizza but can't get your hands on some bread flour, there's another one. Then you can just use a scone recipe. Instead of cutting out scones, you can just have one spread out into a circle or whatever shape you like your pizza, or you could do mini pizzas. Now, my dough is probably a little dry, which is why you can sort of see some cracks, but that's okay. If your dough is a little bit sticky, that's okay. It will be if the liquid is to create sort of a light and fluffy sort of texture. But it's okay if they're a little bit dry. It's fine. No harm done. There we go. That's number 4. That's now one of my trays filled. I'm going to get 8 out of this. As I said before, this is an untested recipe. This is a recipe that I've sort of come up with from my research and when I've made scones and bread in the past. On paper this should work, but we'll see, we'll see. That's a nice shape. It's a nice shape, I like that one. I like you, you're my favourite so far. Don't know if anyone else is baking along with me right now, but I'm finding this quite therapeutic, just tap and press, or tap and press. So trying to be as light as possible and trying to handle them as little as possible. Don't want to handle them any more than we need to. And they don't need to be perfectly circular. This isn't Bake Off. We don't mind if they're a little bit informal, as Mary Berry would say. I'm not doing this for anyone but myself. The fact that other people maybe get to enjoy them, that's just an added bonus. But I'm just doing this to have fun. And that's what cooking should be. It should be about having fun. Doesn't matter if they're not perfect. I'm not going to judge you. There we go, this is just our last scone. I've managed to get 8 out of mine. If you maybe want slightly smaller scones, you may be able to get a few more. If you want slightly bigger scones, maybe a few less. Now I'm going to bring my first tray over. And that was not a good idea. But hopefully you can see that I've got circle-like shapes. They're not all even, but that's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a little bit of my cheese, just sprinkle a little bit on the top. Just a little bit, not much. If you aren't sprinkling with cheese or anything, it's a good idea to do an egg wash. Or if you're vegan, then you can wash with some non-dairy milk. So my pastry brush is a bit floury, and I don't actually need it. Sorry, Mum, I've got it floury for nothing. But it's okay, I'll wash it. Oh God, what am I like? What you would do is you would beat an egg, or just pour out a little bit of milk, and you would just dab it in, and just brush over it a little bit, because that will make sure that we get a nice golden colour on top. But if you're melting cheese or something on top of it, then you don't really need to. Now I may come back and put some more on there. I'll see how much cheese I end up left with. I don't want some to have loads of cheese and some to have none. So. This is the second tray. These are slightly more circular, but as I say, if you do really want that nice circular, perfect circle, then you can roll them out and use either a cookie cutter or the rim of a glass. The only problem with that is obviously you have leftovers and then you have to shape it up and roll it out again. And you want to be handling the dough as little as possible. Yeah, I've got a fair bit of cheese left over, so I'm being a bit more generous with these ones. And then I'll go back and extend the same courtesy to my other scones. Don't know why I talk as if they're real people. They're obviously not. Maybe I'm just a bit mad. It's a bit too festive there, aren't they a picture? Rustic is the word I like to use. Nice and homely. I don't understand people who use rustic as an insult. The root origin of the word is It's supposed to be an insult. But it's a Latin word. It means from the countryside, and it was used as an insult against poorer people who went to school in Roman times, like Horace. He wasn't like destitute, but he was from a more modest background than say the centurion's sons who were going to school. But that's a by the by. Baking, socialism, and now etymology and Latin literature. You do get your money's worth. Don't want to get cheese on the baking tray. Don't want to weld the scones to the baking paper. Just adding a little bit more. I don't waste cheese. Waste not, want not, as they say. There. Perfect. Now that my scones are shaped, and you can see I've left a nice amount of space between them, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop them into the oven for 25 minutes. There's the first tray. I'm going to put both trays in at once. Might not work. That's plan B. There we go. So they're going to go in for 25 to 30 minutes. I'm going to check on them in 25 minutes now. My floury hands. Okay, I'm going to wash my hands now. Okay. And that's it as far as the baking is concerned. Scones really are one of the easiest things to make. I know they do it on Celebrity Bake Off sometimes, so you know it must be easy. Let's see if we've got any comment. Watching you baking in your voice while you talk about it is very relaxing and soothing. Oh, thank you. I'm so glad you feel that way. Yeah, some people have said that. I'm like, oh, the live stream is so therapeutic. Thank you. I'm glad that if you're not baking along with me, at least you can enjoy my voice and me showing you how to bake. I don't know what else to say. That's kind of it. The scones, I've got to set my timer. I was making a quiche the other day for my sister, and I forgot to set a timer. Thankfully, it went all right. It was fine. It was fine. What am I doing? Timer. But I have accidentally left biscuits in the oven for far too long before. It was fine. They were still tasty. They just sorry, bake for 15 minutes. I'm getting my numbers wrong. I'm so sorry. Don't know what's wrong with me today. 15 to 20 minutes, not 25 to 30. 15 to 20 minutes. Thinking of another recipe. I'm thinking of brownies of all things. That's 25 to 30 minutes. Don't know if I woke up and my head wasn't screwed on properly. But yeah, that's it. I swear these live streams are getting like shorter and shorter every time. But baking really is just that easy, and it doesn't need to take a load of time. It's not like a entremet where you have to like intricately layer everything, make sure everything's set, and it takes like 6 hours or something. It can be as simple and straightforward as mixing everything together, shaping it out, and then just popping it in the oven. Baking really doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to be posh or even refined or anything. It can be lovely and beautiful and rustic, just like my scones. I will make sure that I do post pictures for you afterwards, and as always, this video will be on my YouTube channel afterwards. But if no one has any questions, I really don't know what to say. I need to get better at like providing some kind of like entertainment during these things, so that I sort of come across a bit less awkward. But that's how you know, I suppose, that it's live and unscripted. My throat is so dry. I was always that person in English class who, whenever we were like going around reading a poem or a play or something, even after a few lines, like my voice would start getting dry, and I just have to carry on, just trying not to die in the middle of English. Let's see, what we've got here. I was going to say something, but I can't remember what it was. Oh yeah, thank you. Thank you to everyone who's donated so far. Some people have donated once, twice, or for all three of these bake-alongs. Thank you so much. Honestly, every pound, every penny is really, really appreciated by all the comrades in Norwich South and in across British section of the IMT as well. So thank you so much for your generosity. If you haven't donated so far, then please consider if maybe you could spare a couple of pounds to help us build the oncoming world revolution so that it can be successful and we can achieve socialism. What's your favourite baked good? Oh my god, now you're talking. Oh my gosh, there's just so much to choose from. My favourite baked good. Probably something to do with pastry. I do love a quiche. It's one of the reasons why I keep stalling going vegan, because I just love a cheese and onion quiche so much. It's like my favourite thing. And I do definitely something with pastry. Macarons are lovely though. Macarons are really nice. Difficult to make. Very technical. But it's worth it, I'd say. I've only made them a couple of times because of how much time they take. No, thought I was going to sneeze. Sorry. I do like macarons. Or like a pie of some kind, like a sweet pie. I do like tarte au citron. It's basically a lemon meringue. It's kind of like a lemon meringue pie, but without the meringue. It's sort of like it's like a sweet pastry case, pâte sucrée, with kind of like a lemon curd. It's halfway between a lemon curd and a set custard, kind of in the middle. Don't shoot me if you're French and I've just like trampled on your national cuisine. But it's so lovely. The sharpness just complements the sweetness, and it's yeah, tarte au citron. Tarte au citron, it's good. That's my favourite thing. My favourite baked good, I'd say. That was a very convoluted answer. But yeah, macarons, tarte au citron, cheese and onion quiche. They're my favourite things. Something with sun-dried tomatoes. I love sun-dried tomatoes. I wish they were a little bit less expensive so that I could have them more often. But oh, they do smell nice. They do smell nice, these scones. If you have been baking along with me, please feel free to share any pictures, tag me in anything, if you're planning to make them later. Because as I say, this will be on my YouTube channel, so you can revisit it if you would like to. If you'd like to make them at a later date, or you just want to archive the recipe for when you would like, then feel free to do so. And as I say, tag me in anything that you've been baking. If I've inspired you to bake, or if I've inspired you to support Socialist Appeal, have a look at our website. I'll post our website in the chat, in the event description. So I'll post it somewhere. Have a look at our articles, and if you agree with what we have to say, then consider subscribing to our paper or joining us and helping us to build the Marxist tendency that we need to create and educate the cadres, the leadership, and help the class struggle and the oncoming world revolution. Thank you everyone so much. Got my phone down there so I can see. I've seen a few emails saying, "Oh, you've got money from PayPal and stuff." So thank you so much to everyone who has donated so far. And yeah, if you're able to spare a couple of pounds or anything at all, obviously feel free to be as generous as you would like. Then it will be very, very much appreciated. I hope that you have enjoyed this live stream. I will post pictures of the scones once they are finished. Hopefully they'll be successful, but as I say, if not, you are more than welcome to laugh at my expense. Next week, we're going to be baking something a little bit different. It's not going to be my own recipe. So you might take comfort in that. You might think, oh God, at least it works. But no, my other recipes so far have worked. And hopefully this one will. This one is different from the other two, and it hasn't been tested. I sort of created it when I couldn't find flour. I really want tomato bread. I know, tomato scones. So you guys are my guinea pigs, I suppose, which is definitely the most reassuring phrase anyone has ever said. But next week, we're making something special. We are making World War I trench cake. Anyone who was in my English class last year will know this because I made it about 3 different... English class last year? English class at school in sixth form will know this because I made it about 3 times because it was a really easy recipe and it was really tasty. It's essentially a fruit cake. The recipe was sent to people in the trenches so that they could make it. And what it was it was a fruit cake, but it didn't have any eggs. Eggs were in short supply, and so to sort of save up, I suppose, and not waste them on a frivolous pudding, they had like eggless cakes, which is good because it means it's easy to veganize. There is like butter, but again, I found that you can substitute it for dairy-free spread, just as you would in any other cake. So that should be really fun. I'll create a new event for that and post all the ingredients. So next week, yeah, should be really fun. And I guess there's nothing really else for me to say other than thank you so much to everyone who has joined, who has watched, who is watching now, who will watch it later once I post this on YouTube, and keep it up on Facebook. Please tag me in anything that you've made. I think I need to lie down after this. And I hope that you enjoy these live streams, and I shall carry on doing them because I really enjoy them, and I hope that you do too. I love baking, I love talking to you guys, hearing from you, and obviously raising money for Socialist. So thank you everyone so much. I'm so sorry that this one had to keep getting postponed because I was ill, and then May Day, I did my back in, but it's fine, we're all good, and we've finally done it. We've finally made the scones. I hope it was worth the wait. How funny would it be if after all this time be like, oh, but that wasn't worth it. But no, I feel like it was worth the wait. I hope you do too. I'm gonna shut up now, and I'm gonna love you and leave you and say thank you once again. And have a lovely rest of your Sunday, and I will see you soon for trench cake. Bye.